Hey guys, Brian from Boas here. One of the most underrated and overlooked types of boas available are single gene morph boas. Today I'm going to tell you guys why I like single gene morph boas so much, as well as show you some really nice examples of them from my collection. And so to start with, I just want to clarify, by single gene morph boas, I mean a boa with one morph gene that's being expressed visually. And obviously any boa, just like any multicellular organism, has tens of thousands of genes. So we're just talking about the genes that are being bred for to have the morph. And I'm also talking about just visual, because some of these animals are actually het for other genes. But today, all of the boas I'm going to show you are just expressing one visual gene. And I'm starting off with this beautiful VPIT positive albino boa. This is a male that I've had for quite a while, and he's sired a couple of litters. And just a really beautiful, beautiful animal. Just shows you some of the reasons why I'm so enthusiastic about some single gene morphs. Just look at how beautiful this guy is. But I also wanted to say that, as you probably know, most of morph boa breeding is focused on combo morphs, getting 2 or more genes in the same boa. Often, we're talking about 3, 4, 5, or even more genes. And I think at some point it just gets kind of ridiculous, because as you put more and more genes into a boa, the effects of each individual gene are kind of washed out, and sometimes you look at the animal and you don't even know what it is. It's got so many different genes in there. And sometimes you can't even tell what genes are in there, which is another problem. But one of the reasons I like these single gene morph boas so much is that it's just obvious what the effects of the gene are. You can look at this guy and you can compare him to a normal wild type Colombian boa, and he just looks completely different, that beautiful yellow coloration. So you have no doubt about what the effects of the VPIT positive gene are. And there are actually some breeders who are focusing on perfecting the morphs. So rather than just trying to combine more and more and more new genes in one animal, they want to perfect either a single gene morph, or in some cases, a 2 or 3 gene combo. And they want to introduce new background genetic information in order to improve the morph itself, rather than just trying to focus on more and more new morphs. And unfortunately, a lot of morph breeding is like a pyramid scheme, where people try to get in on the newest, latest, and greatest morph and make a lot of money before the price crashes. But we really should be focusing on perfecting the morphs that we already have. Here's another single gene morph boa. This is an IMG, or increasing melanin gene boa, that was born here in the spring of last year. This female is now almost a year old, and just a beautiful, beautiful animal. Single gene, just one IMG, and you can see pretty clearly the effect that this gene is having on this boa. And so this animal is just getting darker and darker with every shed. And even though she's not even quite a year old yet, you can see how dark she is. Just looks completely different from how she looked when she was a baby. And I expect this animal to continue to get darker and darker. And as an adult, I expect that she probably will be almost pure black. Really impressive morph. And looking at this animal, there's no doubt the effect of the IMG gene. And in a single gene morph like this, the beauty of the gene just shines by itself. You don't need all these other genes in there as well that are just going to kind of confuse the whole situation. This animal, her mother is a hypo IMG, and even though the mother has the hypo, she's still very, very dark. But I expect that this animal, being that it doesn't have the hypo, is going to be even darker. And really cool animal. Wasn't planning on holding this one back, but she really, really grew on me, and I just had to, I couldn't let her go. So I look forward to watching her grow over the years and see how she develops. And I should add, she's also double het for call albino and anerythristic, so some really good possible combos will be hopefully produced by this animal in the future. Really nice IMG boa. Here's another single gene holdback animal that I produced in 2024, and this is one of the most commonly available morph boas that often can be purchased for a little more than the price of a normal, and that is of course the hypo. And this is actually the only animal I've ever had that's been just solely visual hypo, nothing else. And this is one of the reasons I held this animal back. I just wanted an animal that was just a single gene hypo. This animal is actually het for VPI, so I can use her for some VPI combo projects in the future. But I just love just the single gene hypo. And hypo has been around a long time, almost as long as they call albino. It's one of the original boa morphs that's been around for decades. It's not very widely appreciated by itself. Of course, it's present in many, many combo morphs like sun glows and moon glows and lots of other things like that. But I just love just the look of the hypo. I mean, it's amazing to think that this is just one gene that takes an animal from, you know, the wild type normal look to this. It's a pretty dramatic effect. I mean, look at that tail there. And this animal, really nice looking animal. Really look how clean the dorsal surface is. Really, really cool looking animal. The other thing I like about this animal and single gene animals in general, they make breeding easier because you don't have to make all these guesses about what the offspring are going to be. When you're crossing two animals with multiple genes together, in some cases there's like scores of different possible combinations. In some cases they can be possible hets for one or more genes. In some cases you look at it, you can't really tell. You know, does it have jungle there? Does it not have jungle? Who knows? It's just really, really confusing. And there are even some of the morph boas that I produced last year I'm just calling possible because I can't tell. You know, until we have genetic testing, I don't think you can really tell just by looking. But this particular animal, it's obvious to me this is just a single gene hypo. It doesn't have any jungle or anything else. As you may know, jungle is somewhat of a controversial morph because it's very, very common. But if you have two copies of it, you have a super jungle. And many people have communicated that this is an unhealthy morph and it doesn't survive very long. Other people have conflicting experiences, so the jury's kind of still out. But you know, sometimes you just don't want jungle in there, and this is why I like just this basic hypo. It's got nothing but the hypo and the het for VPI, and she will make a great breeder in the future. But just a really cool animal that I've just enjoyed admiring, and I've enjoyed just watching grow. And as I mentioned, these guys, just single gene hypos, don't command much of a premium over just the basic normal boa. So a great animal to get if you're looking for a very affordable morph boa that's going to be really nice to look at. One more single gene animal just to show you the beauty of some of these single gene morphs is this one. This is a Moran boa, just single gene, nothing else. And most of the animals I've showed you with Moran have something else like hypomoran or jungle moran. But I produced a number of these beautiful single Moran animals, and I'm really blown away by their beauty. I think this might be the last one that I have available. As much as I'd love to hold back all these animals, I just can't, so this one is still available. She's doing great. But Moran is a great gene because the single copy Moran had this beautiful pastel look like this one. The super Moran has this deep almost blood red color that's very impressive. But looking at the single gene morph, one thing I like about these single gene morphs is they look somewhat natural. They don't look like a genetic freak, like there's obviously something genetically different. It just looks like a really nice boa. And this animal, you can see the Moran just shows you not just the pastel coloration, but Moran has effects. It makes the saddles a little cleaner, a little more geometric, kind of like what jungle does, but just not quite as extreme. You can see the look of the saddles on this one. It also cleans up the tail saddles. It increases the white between the red and the background color. It just makes the animal overall look cleaner and really enhances the appearance, without being too much. You can kind of think of it as food. You add just a little pinch of salt to the food and it really enhances the flavor. But if you dumped a bunch of salt and pepper and turmeric and cinnamon and a whole bunch of other stuff in there, it would just be too much and it would just ruin the flavor. That's why I like a lot of these single gene morphs. And it should also be noted that single gene morphs are sometimes exist in the wild in their single gene form. And obviously you wouldn't see like a moonglow or like a, IMG call, anery or whatever. You wouldn't see a multi-gene animal in the wild, but you can see single gene animals. Sometimes they're just a naturally occurring variant. And that's another reason why I like the morph boas, or the single gene morph boas, is because sometimes they are just a naturally occurring variant. And many of the locality specific morph boas, like the anerythristic paraguana peninsula boa or anerythristic longicauda boa, they actually will exist in the wild in that form. So they're not really just something that occurs in a captivity, but they do have a natural counterpart. And that's another reason to appreciate these single gene morph boas. So I hope this video has given you guys some food for thought when you're thinking about possibly getting your next morph boa, and maybe you want to give another look at some single gene morph boas rather than just automatically going to the combos and trying to cram as many genes into the same boa as possible. If you have any questions or comments, please write them in the comment section below. Thank you for watching and enjoy your boas.